In conclusion, one must admit that this story far surpassed the description "quite good" so commonly used to describe its worth. Surely it was much more than that. Surely it was a winner.
And thanks to Brian O'Richard for that fascinating article. Although it begs the question, where did he get the video from? Once again, we seem to have a great debt of gratitude to Pete Bryant and Vic Pemberton. Thanks, folks. No, seriously, welcome to a recursive, ozone-friendly, mind-boggling alternative theory special. Rayphase shift number 3, 'cause you wanted it. Accept no substitute. As I consult my talisman, you're going on a long journey in the next 90 minutes. And along the way, you'll find...
Paper. For the modern world, this is the kind of paper that made Britain great.
The power of travel is beautiful, Doctor. Very beautiful.
Yes, indeed. Well, as you can see from this panel, Gravis, I control all the main TARDIS functions, the time...
The final story of season 6 ends on a pretty inconclusive note. Okay, so the Doctor is apparently sent spinning towards his exile. Jamie and Zoe seem to have been deposited back in their own time zone. But what about all the Earth soldiers? Did they really get home unscathed? And who are these Time Lord persons anyway? Okay, so the idea of a casino in space is not exactly novel. Bob, in association with Jerry Davis, knocked the idea out of shape circa season 12, replacing it with Revenge of the Cybermen instead. No comment.
What do you mean? What are you laughing at? Either you've gone to sleep. Well, you can't mend people, can you? Of course you can't, no.
And along the way, some alternative theories and the unusual will emerge. But first, we take an ever so slightly non-Doctor Who look at the late great Robert Holmes, as Andrew Trowbridge asks what Bob did next.
Attention! Sensors indicate surface launch.
A missile?
No, it can't be. They can't have spotted Liberator. We've got the blind down.
There it is, look. Just leaving the ionosphere.
They're sending up a salvager from the possible.
Oh, they're better surprise. 7 centuries, it just doesn't seem possible.
It isn't. And that is what is worrying me.
Are you all right, Callie? They're ready. They're watching.
Who? What are you talking about? Callie, what are you picking up?
I don't know. But, Blake, there is something malignant on that ship.
Yes, Blake 7. Now don't switch off, missus. Blake 7 as written by Robert Holmes. Perhaps you ought to pay attention after all. Robert Holmes' association with Doctor Who is of course legend, but there was a mammoth gap between him penning the stories Pair of Kroll and Kaiser Andrew's Army. But, Bob being Bob, he didn't just spend these intervening years sharpening his pencils in anticipation, twiddling his thumbs in boredom, or any combination of these two activities. As Kroll was transmogrified into the 5th segment of the Key to Time, John Leeson donned his knee pads and got back down onto all fours to play K9 again. Meanwhile, if you listen carefully, you could just about discern the sound of Andrew Beach frantically filling his piggy bag in preparation for buying the X-Squid at a forthcoming Panopticon. Finally, yes, I am getting to the point, Bob Holmes pondered the question, what shall I do next? The answer came in the form of 2 scripts for Season B of Blake 7. Season B saw the show finally turning to writers other than Terry Where's My Percentage Nation, and naturally the aid of Robert Holmes was sought out. First out of the typewriter was Episode 7, Killer, a story armed with almost the following plot lines. Blake bravely sends Avon and Villa on a mission, not to destiny, no, instead they are teleported to a radio link base on the planet Phosphoron, with orders not to come back without a copy either of the Blake 7 program guide, or at a pinch, a TP crystal. They choose the latter option, which by the time of the 2nd century of the new calendar is at least vaguely achievable. The base commander, Tynus, owes Avon the odd favour or 20, and with his crystal in their clutches, the crew of the Liberator can hopefully pick up Super Channel, BSB, and even the occasional coded Federation message. Tynus, however, is about as trustworthy as a BBC video salesman claiming a particular story has been completely unedited, and spills the beans. He then clears up this mess and also reports the Liberator's position to Serverland. The Supreme Commander looks up the Liberator position in her adult magazines, cannot put her finger on it, and eventually sets out in pursuit of Blake and company. The The situation becomes ever more complicated with the appearance of a spaceship, which 700 years ago took a wrong turning at the Basingstoke roundabout and disappeared up its own airlock in the uncharted region of 61 Cygni, also known as the Darkling Zone, possibly to avoid infringement with the copyright of one Rod Serling. Thank you, Nick. We'll let you know. A body is recovered from the ship, and whilst it is obviously out of guarantee, it proves to be in surprisingly good nick considering its extreme agefulness. The autopsy is to be performed under the watchful scalpel of Dr. Weiler, as played by a certain Morris dancer, Barry. But it's time for a musical interlude from Dudley Carsprings Simpson, and the opportunity takes this form.
Proceeding to examine the internal organs, I now, in accordance with the law, check the EEG reading to verify that life is extinguished, which it is.
I shall now mark the tissue and blood samples for laboratory analysis.
My God, look!
Weiler, you've got brain life.
That's quite impossible, Dr. Belfry. May I suggest that you adjust your monitor?
Dr. Belfry.
Dr. Weiler's neck's broken.
Yes, in true mummy fashion, the Bobby? Yes, in true mummy fashion, the body comes temporarily to life, decides it can't wait for the BBC video release of The Dominators, and vents its frustration on the director of said story, thereby unleashing a virus that sweeps through the entire base, wiping out all and sundry bar our heroes, and not forgetting Paul Darrow. The end. Well, perhaps I've not been completely faithful to the storyline, but I think you get the general idea. There are, of course, numerous points to pick up about this particular yarn, and only a limited amount of space in Rayphase ship, so I'll restrict myself to the following. Firstly, as with any Holmesian script, one can play the time-honoured traditional game of Spot the Double Act. Blitz and Dibber, Jago and Lightfoot. Auton 72B and 73B are just a few of his more memorable Doctor Who double acts. In Blake 7, however, Bob takes a slightly different approach, using Avon and Villa no less. Paul Darrow agrees with me on this point. I quote, "The best writer for us was Robert Holmes, and he got the Avon-Villa relationship perfect. Whenever we heard a Robert Holmes script was coming up, we didn't even bother to read it. We knew it would be good." So, Paul Darrow never even read the script for Killer. This explains a great deal. No, seriously, missus, try this one for size.
I told you, he's a friend of mine.
Yes, I always knew you had a friend. I used to say to people, I bet Avon's got a friend somewhere in the galaxy.
And you were right. That must be a novel experience for you.
Roberto Holmeso also comes up with this when Blake is brought before the eminent Dr. Belfry.
And just who are you?
Well, according to the Federation, I'm a political criminal. You may have heard of me. My name is Blake.
Yes, but then we're absent-minded scientists, you see. In fact, we've forgotten your name already. Haven't we, Gambrel?
Whose name, sir?
A nice bit of subversion there from the scientific community of the base. Blake's willingness to provide information, advice and assistance, combined with the easy informality typical of such a senior scientist, completely obscures the fact that technically Blake should have been immediately turned over to the mindless military. The classic Holmesian morality also rears its pleasant head at the very end of the episode. Servalan still hasn't actually arrived yet. Well, she was probably had her hands full or she was tied up or something. The moment she lands, she will suffer the fate of all the other victims of the virus, i.e. terminal death. Avon is in favour of this, but Big Butch Blake recognises the potential consequences of a moment's inaction on his part.
Jenna, get the ship moving. I'm going to put out a plague warning.
Are you crazy?
I've got to warn all traffic to stay away from Phosphoron until that virus burns itself out.
Listen, Blake, Servalan is on her way here. She lands on Phosphoron, she gets the plague. She's off our backs for good. You cannot put out a warning.
Suppose some of them don't die. Suppose some of them get off in a ship. That plague goes out to all the galaxies. Millions will die because of it. That is the one responsibility that I will not take.
Looked at overall then, Killer fits nicely into the category of straight science fiction, typified by such scripts as, say, Spearhead from Space and Case for Atrasani. A good solid script with none of the oddball elements of such as The Sunmakers. This slight oversight was of course quickly rectified by episode 11, Gambit.
Part 2 of that article can be heard on the other side. But now something completely different, as they say. A close encounter of a very different kind with a piece of mid-70s merchandise. Mr. Andrew Reed reveals all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right. Hello. Being, as I am, a keen dilettante. Dilettante. Oh, dilettante me. Oh, gosh. What was I talking about? Oh, yes, being a keen dilettante, as I said earlier, a lover of the fine arts, of the more refined cultural aspects of the art world, I thought I would like to educate you all, because being educated like what I am, I cannot have helped but notice a certain piece of Doctor Who merchandising which fully deserves my treatment, as it is so profound, yes, and intellectually absorbing and all that. Yes. I quiver with tremulous excitement, and indeed I feel that I am not worthy to speak of such a magnificent article of human productivity. I humbly shall attempt to review that masterpiece, the Dalek Lolly. Yes, 4 years, or maybe not quite as long as that, the Dalek Lolly has lain dormant, waiting to capture the culture world by storm, and now I almost feel that time has come upon us all. But let me tell you about the Dalek Lolly. Well, firstly, if you take off the splendid paper wrapper, indeed I think that this is paper worth staring at all day, with its paperiness and quality. This is paper for the modern world. This is the kind of paper that made Britain great. This is the paper that will go down in history as being paper of that special class of paper, that a quintessentially accumulative correlation of infrequent interpositions on the refined aspect of paradoxical corporeality. Yes. But leaving the paper to one side for a moment, we turn to the lolly. Unfortunately, I was so absorbed by the magnificent and wonderfully stimulating, vivid and passionate paper that the lolly had melted. But luckily for the interests of my dignified review, it left a rather interesting puddle. There are puddles and there are puddles. Yes, indeed there are. But this was a puddle above and beyond a puddle. Firstly, it was wet. That was the first thing that I noticed. This is the sort of thing which makes my incredible reviewing talents so unique. I was immediately captivated by the way the 60-watt bulb of my kitchen shimmered translucently and vividly, not to mention passionately, across the placid and still surface of this great puddle. It lay there on the table in all its wetness, slowly dripping onto the carpet. After this momentous occasion in my life, I don't think I could ever look at another ordinary puddle in the street without thinking of those precious moments.
Please be quiet.
For the best in science fiction fantasy on film or TV, Doctor Who inclusive of course, the Grimsby Fantasy Society bring you Beyond Infinity, a bi-monthly magazine covering this and much more, comics and role-playing games as well. A must for all fans of sci-fi fantasy covering a wide area. Just $1.20, checks payable to the Grimsby Fantasy Society, from Wayne Fawcett, 68 Tennyson House, Grimsby, South Humberside. Why not join the society for more of the same and discover fans like yourself? Now it's dreary old Nick back with the first of 2 articles. Well, it's cheating a bit because this is part 1 of a 2-parter looking at Take a look at the Radio Times the 2nd week of October in 1977 and you'd either be disgusted, puzzled or fascinated as the first picture of a daring new innovation for Doctor Who arrived. K9, at last a robot assistant, owing more, some cynics might say, to the cute characterisation of our metal friends in Star Wars than the scientific but human element of Doctor Who. But it must be said that The Invisible Enemy was a story that, even now, won me over, and I now owe my present allegiance to the show to this story. He started in part 2, a whim in the mind of a senior doctor of the future. John Leeson's versatility stretched here as to the malevolent alien voice of the nucleus, to the metal mutt himself, itself or herself. At this stage, i.e. season 15, the robot element is clear. The noisy but necessary motor, and the voice that benefits from modulation.
No entry, no entry.
Look, whatever you are, I
am K9, and I am warning you.
Look, I came to see the doctor. I arrived with him.
I do have offensive capability. You have been warned. Retreat, retreat.
This was lessened, as Leeson has revealed, more's the pity, until we're left finally with his imitation. Then, in part 4 of The Invisible Enemy, the controversial decision was made.
Shall we return K9 to the professor?
I think K9 has taken to you. Oh, actually, I have to return to Earth shortly, and you could do me a great favor if...
Take K9 with us?
Yes.
Oh. Yes! Oh, please, Doctor, please, let's take him.
K9 seems to have made up his own mind. I only hope he's TARDIS trained.
Reaction was mixed, and my thoughts were on the commercial market. At 9, I thought a mini toy K9 would take rather less than the 2.5 years in which it did to be released. This was a bold, potentially cutthroat decision on the part of Graham Williams, but like his other 2 experiments, the Key to Time series and the Paris filming, it worked splendidly. Remembered as he is today is a sure sign of his success. At first, in keeping with the 4th Doctor's limelight demands, he is in contempt of K9.
I don't know. It will be all right. It just has a little corrosion in its circuits.
But it's the first K9's last story, Invasion of Time, where K9's true value as a bantermonger comes about.
I reflect a transmission beam off the security shield, feed it back through a linked crystal bank, and boost it through a transducer.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Master.
I don't think you could.
Agreed. Possibility of your explanation being better than mine, less than 1%.
What? You are the most insufferably arrogant, overbearing, patronizing bean tin.
Master?
Nothing. Someone once said that to me once.
Correction, Master. Several people have said that about you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks are not necessary.
Well, at least no one's ever called me smug.
Correction.
Listen. If you destroy the control center after I feed in the Doppler effect and eliminate the redshift, The invasion must succeed.
Probability of success would rise to 98.2.
What's a couple of points between friends?
The bombshell hit at the end of this tale when K9 elects to leave with Leela. Now, maybe this should have been it, but K9 Mark II emerged, highly conveniently, I know. This machine emerged for season 16, specially designed to comply with Tom Baker's ego, and as he starts the quest for the key to time, and only wants K9 to accompany him.
Given a locator.
Thank you.
And an assistant.
An assistant? Oh, please, sir, on an assignment like this, I'd much rather work alone. In my experience, assistants mean trouble. I have to protect them and show them and teach them, and couldn't I just manage with K9? Eh?
K9 is a mere machine.
He's a very sensitive machine.
Here he breaks down, has a new quiet motor, a less modulated voice, you should have swallowed your pride there, John, and is generally well used, being especially well used in the Armageddon factor, when not being melted down for scrap on a Generation Game type conveyor belt. By now he is a superstar, household name, pest, and every TARDIS should have one. Then John Leeson left. Sorry, I have to say this one, leaving a damn animal. In part 2, David Brierley and How the Sun Shine on the Righteous. Side B to come.
I'm going to attempt to review both the excellent novel Frontiers by Christopher Bidmead and the TV version which preceded it, attempt being the operative word here. The differences between the two versions are numerous, from simple changes in who says what lines to the acute difference in the excavating machine realised and the one described, yet each version is enjoyable. There is the inevitable tension between the colonists, who it seems are doomed. If they are not killed by a passing meteorite, they can become retrogrades and starve instead. In either case, the planet apparently has this unnerving habit of getting a bit peckish if you lie down for too long. Then along comes the Doctor, Avec, Tegan and Turlough. Time Lord needs an adventure according to the novel. The hat stand is referred to, which for once in its long and uncomplaining service is to play a very important role in the lives of the TARDIS crew and the inhabitants of Frontiers, as is of course the Doctor, who again displays his knack for arriving when a society is beginning to crumble, despite actually refusing to interfere at first. One of the most annoying scenes in the TV version occurs just after the TARDIS makes planetfall. Tegan, leading the others to the medical shelter, is heard to utter, "Over here," and then, "Over here," and finally, "Over here," just for good measure. In the novel she's allowed to help Turlough with the patient instead. Mr. Range's and Norna's acceptance of the new arrivals is possibly one of the only times the Doctor and co are seen as immediately non-hostile and helpful. Not for long though, of course. I mean, it wouldn't be Doctor Who if someone in power didn't trust them. Accused of being Frontiers' mythical invaders, the Doctor has this to say on the matter.
Please, come and see the TARDIS. As an invasion weapon, it's about as offensive as a chicken volleyball.
One of the best cliffhangers of the Davison era then occurs.
TARDIS, what's happened? It's gone.
The TARDIS has been destroyed.
The viewer, stroke media, is hooked. How is the Doctor going to get into this one? The hat stand has its seen stealing it, and even the Doctor is fascinated. But it has its uses as a weapon, and the Doctor plays along with the charade until Plantagenet appears to be injured by the suddenly lethal hat stand. The Doctor saves his life, but meanwhile Turlough and Norna set off on an exploration of the tunnels beneath the colony ship to discover some overgrown woodlice with mouths apparently full of spaghetti. The secret of the planet's hunger is revealed, and Turlough seems to be suffering from foot and mouth disease as he slavers left, right and centre, while revealing all about the infection of the Tractators. But what is so horrifying about these creatures? I mean, it's unnerving chatting to a large insect, and admittedly, using a living mind to drive the excavating machine is not nice, but the novel gives us a different story, if you'll excuse the pun. Turlough is terrified because of the gruesome technology of the Tractators. If the machines used by the Gravis were in the novel had been visualised on screen, the show would have had to be broadcast after 10:30 p.m. It's a shame the translator could not have been created for television, because it would have been a lot better than the Gravis spitting spaghetti and sounding as if He was just recovering from a bout of laryngitis. The Doctor smothers the Gravis with flattery, and Tegan becomes an android, although the Doctor admits to inform her of this, and it leads to some of the most humorous lines of the story, both on screen and in the novel.
You can't let them do this to me.
I'm terribly embarrassed about all this.
Not at all, Doctor.
It must be the humidity causing the malfunction. These serving machines are perfectly reliable on Gallifrey.
The guard tractator here will restrain it while I show you more of our work here. It is certainly a very convincing replica of a humanoid life form.
I think so. I got it cheap because the walk's not quite right. And then there's the accent, of course. But when it's working well, it's very reliable for keeping track of appointments, financial planning, word processing, that sort of thing.
Although, in my opinion, the best lines are in the novel, which is a shame because they would have been great on television. To quote, without accent, "Listen, quick. You're an android." "I certainly am not," said Tegan indignantly. "Because if they think you're alive," the Doctor went on, ignoring her protest, "they may get the idea of adding you to their human Meccano set. That's the plan they have for Plantagenet." Tegan saw the Doctor's point immediately. "I am an android," she said. "I'm president of the Tractator's fan club." The dramatic rescue of Plantagenet comes after the obligatory megalomaniac's explanation of his plans. But like all megalomaniacs, the Gravis is also too greedy for his own good. Have you ever heard the story of Brer Fox's wonderful tar baby? Brer Fox captures Brer Rabbit by tricking him into getting stuck to a dummy coated in tar. Brer Rabbit begs not to be thrown into the bramble patch. Brer Fox can do anything he wants to him, but please do not throw him into the bramble patch. It is a case of protesting too much, and when Brer Fox does throw him into the bramble patch, Brer Rabbit escapes because it's where he grew up. The Doctor uses this same tactic to entice the Gravis to pull the TARDIS together.
The TARDIS!
What this? Oh yes, well as I was saying, you can have Frontiers, all the fixtures and fittings appertaining thereunto, and I'll pull my TARDIS together and get off your patch.
I should like to see it. This TARDIS.
Well, it's not all here at the moment, you understand. It's been spatially distributed to optimize the packing efficiency of the real-time envelope.
The power of travel is beautiful, Doctor. Very beautiful.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, as you can see from this panel, Gravis, I control all the main TARDIS functions, the time coordinates, spatial coordinates, all inoperative at the moment, of course, because the spatial distribution circuits are switched in. Now you really will have to be more careful, Gravis. Now the autoscan's picking up the location of all the concealed TARDIS components. Oh, well, not to worry. I shouldn't think it's even within your powers to reassemble them. Besides, what would you want with an old Type 40 time and relative dimension in space machine,
But I do want it, Doctor. The TARDIS. Infinite travel within my grasp.
Oh, no, Gravis, please. Take everything else, but leave me the TARDIS.
I will have it.
Oh, no, Gravis, please, I beg you. Spare me the TARDIS.
Have it.
What's he doing, Doctor? Sure, she isn't time to disturb his concentration.
And thus the Doctor saves the day once again, and gets his TARDIS back. One wonders what he would have done without Turlo to help him with the nature of the Gravis and his Tractators. Finally, the faithful hat stand gets its just desserts and is revered as a monument to the Doctor's help. It's a formula story. The Doctor is accused of being the cause of the trouble. Doctor demonstrates he can be trusted. Doctor, with Turlo's help, discovers the cause of the trouble. Doctor saves everyone. They all live happily ever after. And the Doctor is very modest.
Done so much for us.
Yes, quite. Don't mention it.
After all he's done, he just says don't mention it. He means it, literally.
Don't mention it to anyone.
The novel is enjoyable for the fact that the characters' thoughts are recorded as well. Bidmead uses it as the medium to tell the story as he would have liked to see it realised on screen, something which several novelists have failed to do. Both versions of the story allow characters to be developed, from Turlo's major involvement, instead of being immediately locked up so the writer wouldn't need to give him any lines, to Cockerell's intelligent leading and taking over a colony ship, something which leads to promotion in the novel. And there's the hat stand, which plays such a crucial part, i.e. saving the Doctor's life and allowing them to gain entrance to the research room, and thus the discovery of Captain Revere's mind. All in all, Frontiers was one of the best stories of the excellent season 21, with an even better novel to back it up. Full marks to Bidmead. And the hat stand.
That was the lovely Lisa Wardle making her Rayphase Shift debut, and hopefully she'll be returning in Rayphase Shift 4, now being worked on. Now reach for your programme guides and tax your brains on Doctor Who actors, as Andrew Trowbridge takes an alternative theory look at the War Games. Are you ready for this?
Despite its epic length, the final story of Season 6 ends on a pretty inconclusive note. Okay, so the Doctor is apparently sent spinning towards his exile, Jamie and Zoe seem to have been deposited back in their own time zones, but what about all the Earth soldiers? Did they really get home unscathed? And who are these Time Lord persons anyway? It's only with the advantage of hindsight provided by the next 20 odd, in some cases very odd, seasons, that one can truly appreciate the grandiose scale of the saga devised by Mr. Dixon, Mr. Hulk, or, if you prefer, Callum Mack. What follows is just a bit of harmless fun, but at least consider the evidence that will be presented. You might even begin to agree that there's more to the War Games than first meets the visual cortex. The root cause of everything appears to be Jamie, no surprise there. Somewhere along the line, he appears to have developed a faulty memory as to the exact year he met the Doctor. In Part 1 of Underwater Menace, a brief reference is made to a certain Robert Burns. Understandably, Jamie has never heard of the wee laddie, since, quote, to Jamie it's 1746, Robert Burns wasn't born until 1759. All well and good, except why oh why does the following exchange take place in the War Games?
Young woman, where did you meet this man?
Tell him the truth, both of you.
Silence. Well?
We met at a space station.
A space station. And you? Where did you meet this man?
In Scotland.
That's all. Now tell me, when?
In 1745. I was fighting the Redcoats.
You were fighting the Redcoats in 1745? That ambulance, was it going to a hospital or to a lunatic asylum?
Okay, so it could just be a slip of the tongue or a touch of the old shell shock, but perhaps Jamie really believes this, possibly indicating that his memory is being affected. This theme is certainly explored several times by other characters early on in the story. Consider the consequences then if at the end of Part 10, Jamie does get back to Scotland, but 1 year too soon. This action, whether by accident or by design, would have far-reaching effects throughout the whole of space and time. Instabilities would begin to fracture the web of time, but where are the results of these to be found? It appears that the universe did not self-destruct in the middle of the 18th century, so this anomaly must be only one of several whose effects miraculously interfere with each other, reducing the net disturbance of the time vortex to a nice manageable zero. The biggest hint comes in the form of David, no relation to Jimmy, Savile, who, as if by magic, just happens to turn up in the Five Doctors playing, as it happens, a colonel who just happens to encounter Pat Troughton's Doctor. Coincidence? Not on your trans-dimensional Nelly, Sunbeam. Why does Mr. Savile look a mite surprised on the cover of the War Games video? Answer, because his character has also ended up in the wrong time zone, but this time, if you'll pardon the pun, in error by several decades. Somehow he's become interchanged with the real Colonel Crichton, inheriting his memory, experience, job, and copy of the Radio Times. Things are, however, a bit rough around the edges, probably due to the appearance of the time scoop a few minutes later, and he almost begins to recognise that strange little man.
I saw it in the Times.
That's impossible. The reporter's still here.
Tomorrow's Times. And who is this?
That's Colonel Crichton, my replacement.
Ah, yes, mine was pretty unpromising, too.
Come along, Doctor, we'll take her.
Everything all right, sir? What the blazes is going on? Who was that strange little man?
The doctor.
Who?
For completeness' sake, I should also point out that the notion that after the war games, Pratt's doctor was allowed one final visit to the Brigadier before the enforced regeneration. Presumably, this was an attempt to explain matters to the 60s brig so as to smooth over the transition into spearhead from space. Somewhere along the line, though, somebody got it all wrong, and Pat ran into the 80s brig instead, thus confusing everybody, including Terence Dix, one suspects. Staying with the military, or at least the pseudo-military, we must consider the dynamic duo from Planet of Evil, Tony McEwen and Graham Weston. I maintain that, once again, it's not just the actors returning to the series, it's the characters, here taking the place of the original Baldwin and DeHaan. The difficulties encountered by Tom Baker's Doctor in returning to London 5 minutes before leaving Loch Ness could likewise hamper the Time Lord's attempts at returning Russell and the Redcoat. Incidentally, although the Redcoat was, quote, shot in the leg, I don't think this implies instantaneous death. Besides, the Time Lords could possibly return every soldier at the moment of their abduction, thus ensuring that those who had died on the aliens' war planet went on to lead a full and satisfying life in their own wars again, or not, as in the cases previously described. Perhaps then Private Moore was pleasantly surprised by his rapid accession to the throne of the planet Peladon. Maybe even got lucky and ended up as two simultaneous Cybermen with the unlikely names of Gurn and Shao. Okay, so Look didn't actually die on screen, but I don't rate his chances of survival too highly, especially after having to admit to Herr Kapitan von Weck that his 3 time-travelling guests have just gotten away after only being armed with a sonic screwdriver and a couple of silly tin hats. Pat Gorman's reappearances are, of course, far too numerous to mention, and the idea that Sergeant Benton is actually a reincarnated imaginary Yeti from Patty T's brain box is absolutely, insanely and utterly preposterous. But I do like it. And what about Philip Maddock? Maybe, just maybe, the Warlord was allowed a new life in the form of the equally dotty, if struck off, Dr. Mahendri Solon, disciple of, surprise surprise, renegade Time Lord Morbius. This would fit in nicely with the popular contemporary notion that there are only really 7 truly nice Time Lords, and they all call themselves the Doctor. Or if your name's Anthony Howe, 6 nice Time Lords and Colin Baker. Suppose then that the corruption now rampant in Time Lord society was already fully developed by the War Games. Let's consider the threesome we are presented with in Part 10. Suppose it was Clyde Pollitt's Chancellor who was the one manipulating events and causing all these temporal disturbances. It certainly casts new light on his attitudes in the 3 Doctors. Or suppose that Bernard Horsfall's Goth was already under the influence of the Master, or as I've always known him, the War Chief. No, I'm not really suggesting that the War Chief is the Master. Well, maybe not. Goth exiles the Doctor to Earth, thus enabling the 2 old enemies to lock horns a year and a bit later in Terror of the Autons. This idea at least seems fairly feasible. But there's one character still unaccounted for, who perhaps presents the most intriguing possibility of all. Of course, we're all too familiar with the character of the Valeyard, somewhere between your 12th and final incarnation, says the Master, very ambiguously. Does the driving force behind the 6th Doctor's trial have an equivalent in the War Games? In 1973, Terence Dix wrote the stage play 7 Keys to Doomsday, featuring the ex-stars of Doctor Who, Wendy Padbury, which is a coincidence of only minor proportions, and Trevor Martin, who played the Doctor. Take a deep breath, prepare yourself for a mind-blowing revelation. Trevor Martin plays a Time Lord in the War Games. Perhaps a Time Lord known only as the Doctor. Take another look at the War Games.
What about James Bree in the War Games?
James Bree? Oops, sorry, I forgot. Apologies to Mr. Bree, but then I've never really been a fan of French soft cheeses.
Yes, well, think about that. A lot. Now, to finish this side, a word from the Leader of the Opposition, Keith Musselwhite, producer of RPS's rival twin tape zine, DZFM, out now, by the way. We asked him to look at the 1985-86 18th-month gap for Doctor Who, but him staring at a blank screen for 18 months used up a lot of tape and wasn't very interesting. So we asked him to summarise it, and this is what he did. Look out for his backing music. He has a warped sense of humour.
Having been asked to sum up the differences between seasons 22 and 23 and whether the 18-month suspension had any effect in the proceedings, I would have to be honest and say, well, I'd rather have seen the third and final series of The Tripod than what arrived in 1986. No, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Trial of the Time Lord, but found the style of the show exactly the same as its predecessor. What few changes were made to the show were trivial ones. New title music, incidental music composers, etc. Instead of concentrating on the real essence of the series, the plots and the scripts, which is what really matters. However, having said all this, I do find season 23 easier to watch than season 22, even though the latter had the better script. But it's just the 45-minute episode did nothing to enhance that quality. Well, let's answer that question that I was set out to answer. What effect did the 18-month gap have on the programme? Well, bugger all springs to mind. Unfortunately, this is true. The production team tried too hard, especially having just one story for season 23 was fateful. How do you honestly expect an audience to sit down and keep watching for 14 weeks, to watch a programme that hasn't been on for almost 2 years? And with the state of the scripts, the viewing figures were bound to suffer, which they inevitably did. On a more positive note, Colin Baker's portrayal of the Doctor had thankfully mellowed, and his relationship with Perry was easier to watch. That is, until we get to Midwall, then I get totally lost. But that's maybe because I'm totally thick. Michael Gray said back in 1985 that the show needed a good rest, and I agreed with him, it did. But the show also needed new inspiration. This came partially after Eric Saywood quit the show, and thankfully Pip and Jane Baker didn't take over, otherwise there wouldn't have been a show even today. In a way, season 23 was the end of an era. With Saywood gone, the sad death of Robert Holmes, and the untimely sacking of Colin Baker, although I never really settled with Colin's portrayal as the Doctor. This is nothing against Colin personally, but J&T and Eric Saywood instructed Colin to portray him in this way. Of course, all this led to a new team of Andrew Cartmel and Sylvester McCoy, who was instantly likeable as the Doctor. One big hype for season 23 was the arrival of Bonnie Langford halfway through the series. To be honest, I have nothing against Bonnie. She just played Mellis herself, which is probably what she was instructed to do. But whether Bonnie's arrival helped the series or hindered it, it's up to you to decide. But, to the answer to the ultimate question of did the series improve during the 18-month break, well, in simple terms, no it didn't.
Remember RPS2? Well, we have 2 letters from 2 people suspiciously familiar. Coming up.
A few musings on RPS2. It was nice to hear some constructive criticism from Keith re season 26. The Longleat article was quite good, but in need of a thesaurus.
Is that a kind of dinosaur?
No, but extreme recognition should go to Nick's tape deck for chewing up large portions of my Gunfighters article, making it even less comprehensible than it was in its original form.
That's what you get for buying cheap old tapes. Cut!
I very much enjoyed RPS2 whilst doing my paper round. In fact, I almost fell off my bike in anticipation, especially as it featured me. Sorry, ego. Anyway, a total supercalifragilisticexpialidocious issue, although I can't remember for the life of me what was on it. It was very good anyway. Tell all your friends to buy it. That's what they've told me to say anyway.
That's the side past
safe to be found on the other side. And so, from the depths of Termination's void, I say why not turn over and experience it? Nick, look out below. More royalties from the official Dalek book. Did you say the word Dalek? Oh yeah, £10 in the wallet, please. Michael Braid. Language sympathy, just pay up. I'm alright, here we are. You can turn over now.
Looked at overall then, Killer fits nicely into the category of straight science fiction, typified by such scripts as, say, Spearhead from Space and Case for Androzani. A good solid script with none of the oddball elements of such as The Sunmakers. This slight oversight was of course quickly rectified by episode 11, Gambit.
The only game of skill in this establishment. The Clute challenges all comers. A win or a draw gets you $1 million. 1 million credits, mes amis.
Okay, so the idea of a casino in space is not exactly novel. Bob, in association with Jerry Davis, knocked the idea out of shape circa season 12, replacing it with Revenge of the Cybermen instead. No comments, please. Then there's the rather more down-to-earth concept of Gamble with Time from David Fisher, which eventually mutated into the magnificent City of Death. But Bob actually got the idea to a finished script that was eminently broadcastable. Unlike Killer, which is a relatively self-contained script, leaving no loose ends flailing, the script of Gambit is just one component of the search for the location of Star One. Note how Bob is considered a dab hand at such forms of narrative, see also The Key to Time. Oh, and Trial of a Time Lord if you must. I'm not sure what the verb for spotting ex-Doctor Who stars is, but you can do a lot of it with Gambit. Discounting the regulars, yes, 15% off Brian the Actor Croucher, and I'll even throw in a free photo of Paul Darrow and Colin Baker posing beside a piece of ham. See if you can tell the difference. Oh, sorry, where was I? Ah, yes. Memorable contributions are made from the ever-silvery Aubrey Wood as Crantor, John Leeson playing toys with horns. Oh, thank you very much. Dennis Carey as Dockerly, Sylvia Coleridge as the croupier, who shall remain nameless.
The name is Ducat.
Surely not Duckett, is it?
The name is Ducat.
Ah, thank you. Paul Grist, better known as Bill Filer from Claws of Axos, gets to be a Chevidic, and the Clute is none other than Deep Roy, here reprising his haunting Mr. Sin laugh. For the sake of completeness, the plot shall be summarised thusly. Blake has got out of bed the wrong side and is in a bad mood. He receives a threatening letter from the Reader's Digest Memorial Fund, so he decides to destroy Star One, the Federation Computer Control Centre. Since he cannot find it on any of his ordnance survey maps, he tries to find the one person who remembers where the Federation left Star One. Blake is searching for a cyber surgeon named Dockerly, whose mother was frightened by a dyslexic greengrocer. Blake's quest is a little misplaced since Dockerly doesn't know the location of Star One either. Thankfully, though, he knows a man who does. Well, they had to cut the season out to 13 episodes somehow, didn't they? Dockerly has been traced to the gambling centre known as Freedom City. Here he has also been etched, engraved and photocopied. Blake and his bonds arrive, wanting a quiet word with his cyber surgeon. I could make a joke about removing Chris Robbie's accent at this point, but I'm not going to. Servalan also wants a somewhat louder word with Dockerly, and with Blake, and with the owner Crantor. The word is probably goodbye. Also, Travis is lurking as only Brian, a dramatic Croucher, can, and he wants an extremely noisy word with as many of the above as is humanly possible. Meanwhile, Avon, Villa and a conveniently miniaturised Aurak flummox everyone by forming a Holmesian triple act with decidedly monetary motives.
The big wheel is run by a computer that fixes the odds at 5% in favor of the house, right?
Right.
Right. Aurak reads computers.
Oh, that is beautiful. Avon, there are times when I almost get to like you.
Yes, well, that makes it all worthwhile.
I mean, you give me a warm feeling right here, round the money belt.
With Aurak's help, Villa makes a totally immodest profit, thus rubbing Crantor up the wrong way. Villa is gently persuaded by about 16 pints of certain alcoholic beverages to challenge the Klutes to a quick game of speed chess. A reaction shot of Avon at this point lasts less than a second, but ingrains itself permanently on the memory. However, because he has a box of flashing lights on his side, Villa forces a draw, scores 3 points on the football pools, doubles his money, and swiftly scarpers. Meanwhile, much toing and froing from the various factions rewards Blake with the following clue.
That last operation, you said it was faked. Does that mean he can still remember?
As far as I know, Blake, I certainly hope so.
Who is he?
His name was Logan. He was a psychosurgeon like myself. Perhaps that's why I changed my heart. Anyway, we faked the operation between us. We didn't erase the brain print. We took a copy of it. And then we both ran. He took the copy with him. I heard that he'd gone to Earth on a planet called Goth. And later I heard that one of their tribal chiefs had his brain print on a thong round his neck. Well, either it was the print or his head. They're a crude lot on Goth.
Quite. Goth? Where have I heard that name before, Robert? Anyway, having established himself as a series regular, one can almost sense that Bob is taking the opportunity to enjoy himself with gambling. John Leeson's character goes by the very suspicious name of Toys, and as for the gambler named Thrills, well... I also wonder how much influence Bob was allowed on the production side, especially when it came to the costumes. Aubrey Wood struts his stuff in a hideous black and white number, and John Leeson wanders about with what looks like a bunch of intergalactic bananas on his head. Time is taken out to comment on this last point.
Toys, are you sure that headgear is part of the uniform? It is of the period, Crantor. It looks a little heavy. May I say that your own costume is quite magnificent. It really suits you. Yes, it does, doesn't it? My designer tells me that it is patterned upon the attire of someone called the Prince Regent. Oh, what a pity that everybody doesn't enter into the spirit of carnival of Mardi Gras as wholeheartedly as you and I.
Mention must also be made of the classic portrayal of Travis provided by Brian Olivier Croucher. Okay, so maybe he's not a patch on Stephen Grief, but he does deliver the occasional line with panache.
You want a drink now, Travis?
I'll have a Vita's Aid. It's your new muscle, Sutherland. Looks like a powder puff.
In conclusion then, Robert Holmes's first 2 stories for Blake 7 are indeed worthy of the name. Whilst the long-awaited repeat of the series looks as unlikely as ever, perhaps the recent BBC video releases will prove successful enough to merit some proper unedited episodes appearing on the shelves. And if they're written by Robert Holmes, so much the better.
And now it's time for Mr. Goodman with part 2 of his article. Canine, part 2. Canine with laryngitis? Let's not be silly, but Terry Nation welcomed the idea, as it kept his paws away from the precious Daleks in Destiny of the Daleks when season 17 opened. Then along came Creature from the Pit, and suddenly Canine had new expressions in his voices. Care of Mr. David Briley, the new Canine. Suddenly he could be demanding.
Guard, lift me down.
He could narrate.
Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to...
And was even weak-chested. OTT? Well, on this point I have to agree. But I got used to David Briley. But that voice just didn't seem to fit and was a bit too emotional. So after 3 stories, 4 if you include Sharda, which I do, new producer John Nathan Turner hired John Leeson back for a finale. K9 was officially announced retired. His popularity came to the fore in the form of a campaign by The Sun, all rude comments in writing, to stop the decision despite its outcome. Has that ever happened before or since? Well, he must have made some impact, apart from crashing into things, that is. In his last story, Warrior's Gate, the production team certainly gave him plenty of waffle, at half marbles.
Computer 0.00057, mistress. Please apply 0.67 error correction to this estimate. Error in error correction estimate estimated at 0.3705. Error correction estimate error. Correction. All present and correct. King's Regulation, brackets, Army, close brackets. Report of the orderly sergeant to the officer of the day. Defaulters, Marshal Ford.
It's all going to be all right, K9.
The new production team, it seemed, saw K9 rather as a bind than an asset, with many breakdowns in this season 18. You either loved him or you hated him. Visiting actor Bill Fraser concluded, I quote, "You're useless."
You're useless.
And accepted the part just to say that. Meanwhile, many people, young and old, bar the hardcore fans it seems, were now attached to K9, hence the campaign in The Sun. This decision to axe him was quite reasonable, however, as he had done his stuff. But we all wanted to see him in action one last time after his abrupt
K9, it'll be all right with you behind the millers.
I'll take care of him.
I'll miss you.
departure. Yes, K9 and Company, the first Doctor Who spin-off. Not the kind that Bob Baker and Dave Martin approved of, but nevertheless well written by the late talented Terence Dudley, and the laser beam effect actually worked. So there you have it. What was originally Dave Martin's tribute to all his run-over dogs became a worthy piece of Doctor Who myth stroke hardware, whether you liked him or not.
As soon as I reset the coordinates, we'll finish that game of chess.
We've stopped dead.
Can I? What did he say? Negative. Can he paint? Negative.
Not him. Yeah, it. Sorry, K9.
Apologies are not necessary. Oh, thank you, mistress.
Now going away on holiday. Nice long holiday. Would you like that, K9?
Well, only one more article from me to go. Double Duds, in case you were wondering, will be along later, chaired by Mr. Andrew Candish again. Until then, here's another alternative article. As Elaine Ball explores the activities Kinder proposes. Here's an article she made earlier.
Welcome to a little rendition of how to make, yes, your very own cardboard cutouts from Kinder chocolate. So here we are, we're going to actually do the old do your didgeridoos. We're actually going to do a cardboard cutout of the Kinder people. So, first of all, you take one common garden, or however you say the word, piece of card. Very nice it is too. And my piece of card, in fact, is probably about 12. Well, I'm not quite sure how long it is really. I haven't got a ruler. I would say it was about 12 inches in diameter, really. No. Not very good at maths. It's about 12 all the way around, basically. It's a square. Yes? What you need is a square piece of card. And the best thing to do is have a pale coloured card. If you have a dark coloured card, you can't colour it the colours you want to colour it. If it's pale, you can colour it any colour you like. A piece of card, the size that it is, will probably make about 3 people, if not 4. So you need some nice pens or pencils. And the first thing you want to do is to get a nice sharp pencil, if you haven't got any pens, because I haven't got any, and it's to draw a shape of a person. Now, children at home, be very careful, because you don't want to let your parents near this, because it could prove rather dangerous. You don't want to let them near any sharp objects. If they're like my parents, then you won't want to get them near any sharp objects. Right, first thing is to draw the head, and then to do the arms, which is what I'm doing now. And then you want to do the body, and some nice legs. Great big bulbous feet, because that's how they have them in. And another one like that. And then you want to put a nice smiley mouth. Nice big smiley mouth. That's it. So it looks a bit like a jelly baby, only been stretched. But nice big bulbous eyes. And best to give it some nice eyebrows. Dennis Healy eyebrows, in fact, would be the best idea. This, in fact, is going to be a man. And I'm going to give him some nice big eyes there. Look, that nice eyes. Can you see that? And a nice nose. Give him some ears as well. Does help, really. Now, I'll quite understand if you want to fast forward this, because it's not very exciting, is it, really? When somebody asked me to do this, they said, why not do a cross between Victoria Wood and Blue Peter? I thought, what's a good idea? And then I thought, I don't know, I'm going to do that. So, right, now, this, he looks lovely. Oh, I'm going to give him some very nice clothes. He's going to wear a very nice green jumper. So it's an olive green jumper. Probably the wool version, the actual real wool. Probably got that from somewhere down in Devon, probably, from a little shop down one of the little cobbled streets. Probably got that when he was on holiday last year in... There we are. This is rather nice green colour. You could, in fact, if you wanted to, make an entire village or entire town. Or even, if you want to go really way over the top, you can make an entire country, children, yes. You too can have your own civilization of cardboard cutouts. Now, I'm going to give him a nice pair of red trousers, I think. Have I got red? Yes, okay, here we are. Nice pair of red trousers. They're going to be slightly shorter than the average pair of trousers, because he's going to have some boots on. Just give him do his hands the right colour. These are rather nice. He looks rather a nice little character, really. I'll just give him a belt, because he looks like he could do with one. It's going to be the buckled variety, the rather thick buckled variety. There, that's super. It'll probably have the button fastening flies, I should imagine, because that's all the rage nowadays, isn't it? It's going to have a nice pair of orange boots, I think, and they're just going to be just orange, and I'll probably do nice shoelaces to go, or bootlaces to go with them. Your parents or your family would have a whale of a time with these delightful little cardboard cutouts. I'm in fact going to give him some bootlaces now. In fact, you could do no end of things with this. You could make your very own Margaret Thatcher if you want to, and put her on the stake. We don't want to talk about poll tax, do we? Because it's a naughty word. Right, there's my man. Oh, he's lovely. I'm going to do a lady now. There we are. La, 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 la. There's some beautiful blue hair. She's going to have very vivacious lips, actually. She's going to have lovely purple lips. And I've actually found a pinky colour, so I'll do her pink. Her face. Now we're going to do her body. Somewhat voluminous, to say the least. There we are, that's a nice yellow dress. I'll just give it a very bright belt to go around the middle of orange colour. Just do her other pink bits. And now I think we could honestly say we could cut them out. Now, in order to cut them out, you need a very sharp pair of scissors. But what you must remember is not to cut your fingers off. So let's start at the bottom. Whoops! Got a little bit too carried away there. The fun thing about this is that it gives you extreme activity throughout the entire day. There is no way you'll get bored with these cardboard cutouts. If of course you don't feel that you can quite cope with this particular task, if you'd like to send a stamped address envelope and 50 quid, preferably in used notes, we would be quite happy to send you our how to make the Blue Peter Davison way, and it'll give you all the instructions of how to make these delightful little items. I'm having a bit of bother getting round the corners now, children. For a woman and a man, there we are. And don't they look delightful? I'm sure you will agree that they really are quite something. Yes, they're amazing, aren't they? Rather taken by the man, actually. He's rather good looking, then. No, he's rather cute, actually. He reminds me of something. Matthew? Hello, Matthew. Yes, of course. You can seriously think about making headquarters and actually think about doing lots of things with these, really. There's no end of things you can do. You can bend their arms and then... Oh dear. I've had a bit of an accident, children. I've just broken the leg off of one of the people I've just made. It's off the lady's leg, actually. What do you mean? What are you laughing at? Either you've gone to sleep. Well, you can't mend people, can you? Of course you can't, no. Actually, that was a complete waste of time, and I don't know why I'm sitting here doing it, really. Nick, all is forgiven. No, you won't have me back next time. I'd just like to make one announcement to a certain personage called Andrew Reed. Swine. Yes, he gave me a false address for Nicola Bryant. I'm so upset.
These are the family hijacked the RPS airwaves to tell you all about their fantastic issue.
Yeah, muscle-wise.
Deborah Watling, Cara McIntosh, Nick Goodman, whoever he is, and Elaine Bull, all make up DZFM. Available now. Simply send 50 pence a piece, a blank C60 cassette, and an SAE to DZFM 36 Wyndham Road, Salisbury Wells, SP1 3AB.
It's fascinating. It's stimulating. It's annoying.
DZFM. Now back to RPS and Dick Goodman doing something stupid. Who was that wimp?
Now an angry word from Lisa Wardle about my repeats review in RPS 2.
Oh yes, I've got a bone to pick with you, with that little thing you did on repeats, your little article at the end of side 1, in which you, at the end of which you said, right, come on, let's get all these repeated, and we want to see, and you went, Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, Baker, McCoy, and of course, Colin Baker. We want to see him on our screens again. And I'd just like to know why you missed out Davison. And, I'd just like this explanation, please. I'm thoroughly disgusted. I'm also running out of tape on this side.
Sorry, Lisa, and everyone else. The exclusion of Mr. Davison from my review was purely accidental. I would like to see his error repeated. It's just RPS2 was complete before I realised the mistake. Even I'm not perfect. Now some late news. The actor and RPS presenter Andrew Candish has died, after having a 500 weight fall on him as dropped on by me. Just before going to France, having not done my Double Duds article planned for this issue, he's scarpered. No, seriously, the Squirt has profusely apologised for not delivering his Double Duds review, which was meant to go on this tape zine. Double Duds will be returning in RPS4 in October-November. So will Mr. Candish, on crutches. We did ring him up in France, though, but all he said was... So, our regular article, our only regular article, is being rested for a month. Also, after all, there's a limit to the Doctor Who turkeys you can stick up for, I suppose. Instead, our local Wiltshire radio station now looks at last year's Honeycomb Convention.
Courtney. Nick, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
We had a bit of fun earlier on, didn't we? But you're a bit of a comedian, aren't you?
Oh, yes, I love comedy. I've done so much of it, and I guess I'm learning about it. Actually, I'm a terribly frustrated classical actor. I like to do the Shakespeare parts, but they won't employ me. So I've learned comedy instead. Well, I hope I have.
Now, you've appeared in many episodes of Doctor Who. Do you take the part very seriously?
Yes, I play him for real. You see, I don't do a sort of Monty Python on the Brigadier. I mean, you look at army commanders down the centuries, that they've made lots of mistakes. And the humour that comes out of the Brigadier, I hope, is the fact that he gets it wrong. But that's why you like it. He gets it wrong. He just usually gets it wrong. For example, very briefly, and tell me to stop talking if you want to. There was a scene once where they arrive on an alien planet, and all hell's breaking loose, and they all know they're in trouble. The Brigadier says, now calm down, everyone, calm down. I've had a recce outside, and I'm fairly sure that's chroma. Now, that was my line I wrote, actually, because I thought he got it wrong again. He thought it was chroma, and of course it's some terrible planet.
Nicholas, you actually appeared in Doctor Who before you played the Brigadier, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, in one called Dalek Master Plan, which was a character called Brett Vine, who was killed off after 4 episodes. But then I came back as the Brigadier, or the Colonel first, then he became Brigadier.
So what was your first episode?
My first episode was in the Dalek Master Plan with William Hartnell, and it was when he was the Doctor, the good Doctor. And Jean Marsh played my sister, and she killed me. Fratricide.
What about when you played the Brigadier? Because they needed this unit, the United Nations Intelligence Task Force.
Yes.
You worked with John Pertwee for
No,
that.
Patrick Troughton. Yes, Patrick Troughton first. The first one was with Patrick Troughton was called Web of Fear. It was about the Yeti. It took place in the London Underground, and I was a colonel then. It was only supposed to be for one, as far as I knew, one story. That's all. But then John Pertwee was about to take over, so they then had another one. I had another story with Pat Troughton, which was a dummy run for when John Pertwee took over. The second one was called The Invasion. It was about the Cybermen with Pat Troughton.
The Doctors, they're all very different, aren't they? Was John very different to Patrick to work with?
Yes, they're all different, but they're all, as I have a line in The Five Doctors, which was the special they did some years ago, when he was asked, and as the Brigadier says, splendid chaps, all of them, all different, do it their own way, but they're all lovely.
What about favourite enemies?
Favourite enemies? Well, I take it you mean by that sort of the monsters that would freak me out the most and frighten me, possibly, and I have to tell you that the giant maggots were the worst. That was a story called The Green Death. Those giant maggots really frightened me far more than the Daleks.
Yes, I can remember they used to frighten me when I was sat behind crouched behind the settee. You know, Nicholas, you also filmed Doctor Who in Wiltshire, didn't you? In Oldbourne. The episode, I think the series... The Demons.
The Demons, yes.
Yeah. What's your memories of that time?
I remember very well in June waking up one morning after we'd been filming, and it was snowing in June. So we had sunshine the day before. I remember that. I remember the village of Oldbourne, the smashing people there. We had such a lovely time. And I also remember that the Demons, in my opinion, and this is agreed by most other people, was probably the best one that was. Well, I think it's one of the best ever done, The Demons. It was, apart from the regulars like Roger Delgado, who was in it then, the visiting artists, all the other people were so well cast and very good. It was a cracking good story and very well directed by Chris Barry, and it is one of my favourites, apart from Inferno, which I like more because I was able to, in that story, play the Brigadier We Hope You Love and the Fascist Beast. This is where the TARDIS goes sideways, and England is a fascist state. So it's lovely playing villains, you know. I had an eye patch here, and no moustache, and a great dueling scar down there, which used to take about an hour and a quarter to make up in the morning, filming. And it's very nice as a contrast for an actor to be able to play in one story two totally different aspects of brigade. We used to call the brigade leader, you know, and it was all the fascist.
One question I should be asking quite a few times on this programme. Why do you think Doctor Who is so popular? And why has it lasted so long?
Its longevity, I think, is due to the fact that it has always developed. A lot of people are very kind sometimes. They say, you know, the unit years, which are very popular years when I was a regular, wouldn't you like them to come back? And of course it'd be nice as an actor to be asked back, but I think that show's always got to develop. It's got to evolve all the time. And you need new talents, new ideas. And as long as you retain an element of humanity and humour with it, I think that's its popularity. It's the programme is on the side of the angels. That may seem an odd thing to say, but I think it is. It's about goodness and evil, and goodness will win.
Nicholas, you're going to stay with us.
Okay. Teenager, be they middle-aged, have got their own favourite doctor. I once, very briefly, if I can, I was asked in America when I do a lot of conventions over there, my impressions, having worked with the 5 of the doctors, what was my impression? And I would say, and I was describing, mind you, the character, not the actor, the character, the way they played the doctor. You would have I beg your pardon, I'll start again. You had William Hartnell, who came over tetchy, Patrick Troughton was impish, John Pertwee was elegant, Peter Davison was amiable, and I'd missed out Tom Baker, who was arrogant. Peter Davison...
It is a Dalek. Are you blind?
Well, I might be, sir. A Dalek, eh? I thought you were a Cyberman.
Oh, answer that question. Ignorance is something that is very rare on Skull.
Oh, I see. Right. Well, I thought you were a baked bean tin on casters, actually.
Exterminate!
Yes, all right. Well, we'll be talking to you, if we may, in the second hour of the programme. Will that be all right with you?
Let me think about it.
You think then, do you? No. I was only joking. He's moving closer to me. Mind the microphone. Well, we'll be talking to all sorts of wonderful people in the second hour. We're talking to you, Philip. Those voices you do for Doctor Who, absolutely marvellous, without any, mechanical computer
modulators or anything, no.
Give us some more.
Ours is the victory, Nida. We have won.
And in fact, we actually got the man who played Nida, who was actually Davros, the sort of chief Dalek sidekick. Peter.
Yes, that's right. I was Supreme Commander Nida, which is faintly disguised from the head of the Gestapo in Genesis of the Daleks, and my name's Peter Miles.
Peter.
Get your copy at the local Our Price record stores.
What a plug! Peter, was it fun working on the Doctor Who set?
I've never got over it, yes. I've done 3 complete stories of Doctor Who playing the main human being Nasty with Pertwee and Baker. And I've never got over how much I've enjoyed it. I'm still attending Doctor Who conventions 10 years after I made the last one, although it's been out in British TV and overseas quite a lot of times since Genesis. I enjoy it more than I can say, yes. And it's a great honour to still be here at the conventions in 1989. It's marvellous.
Now, Nida got shot or killed, didn't he?
Nida died a glorious death, which I did myself, because there wasn't time to direct it, against a pillar in the last episode, yes. Even the Daleks got me at the end, although I was loyal, the only one in the world loyal to Davros.
It must be terrible for the guys in the Daleks for hours and hours twiddling about with levers. I mean, they must be sort of covered in sweat when they surface.
They are suffering terribly in the Daleks, and indeed when we did Invasion of the Dinosaurs, the guy who was in the largest prehistoric monster was suffering more than the guys in the Daleks in Genesis, because I saw him come out of his suit once, and he was in a bad way.
Yeah. But of course you would spot a Doctor Who a mile off, wouldn't you?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I'm afraid I know. Yes, I've got 3 friends who are Doctor Who, and I can see the current Doctor Who standing over there in the doorway.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It is the Doctor.
it's the Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. Hello,
Hello,
Sylvester.
how do you
How
do?
are you? My
Fine.
name's Dave, by
Hi,
the way.
Dave. Nice to meet you.
Not at all. And you're here in Swindon just, what, for a few hours?
Yes, yeah, yes, I am actually literally here just for a few hours, because I've got to rush off somewhere else, up to Gloucester somewhere.
Yeah. Do you attend many conventions, Sylvester?
Well, I've attended a few, not as many perhaps as possible, because they always have them during the summer, and that's when I'm working, when I'm actually making the show, so it's very difficult to get to them.
So you must be sort of, well, occasionally bumping into Peter over there and...
No, hello, Peter, how do you do? Nice to meet you.
Yes.
Hello, Sylvester.
Yes.
I love you.
He says he loves you.
I love the current Doctor Who. Thank you very much, thank you. He's my agent as well, you know.
How much are you paying him?
10%. I've got to 12.5 now after that, though.
So what about, how did you get the role? I've got to ask you, how did you get the role? When did you hear that you were going to be the 7th Doctor?
Well, I heard, funnily enough, it was in Gloucester where I am now. I went down there and waited for them to decide whether they're going to do it, and they said yes. But how I got it was I heard that Colin was leaving on the news, and I phoned up my agent, said there's a job going at the BBC. It happens there's 2 jobs going at the BBC. There was the Director Generalship and Doctor Who.
And you went for the Director Generalship?
Well, by mistake, they put me in for that interview. But I turned it down. It wasn't as much fun as being the Doctor.
Probably get less money as well.
No, I don't think so. No. You work for the BBC.
Well,
money is something they don't discuss. It's something they don't give out either.
You've heard.
Now, here's the last of our alternative reviews. And I'm doing it.
It's not true.
It's true, you pompous ass.
Well, it's more of a suggestion, really. A rather silly suggestion, really. I've called it simply Potential Monster Book 3.
It's the horrible thing I've ever seen. What the devil is it?
A man with one eye and green skin, eh?
The stage was set for the reawakening of the merchandise scene, as in 1975 an unsuspecting public was greeted by Tom Baker's weird and ultimately durable Doctor. And as always, a host of nasties to landmark the tales, under the now revered banner of Mr. Hinchcliffe. So, along comes the Tom Baker doll, along with Cybermen, Giant Robot, Dalek, and amongst other things, the Monster Book. A large format paperback with black and white pics, and the jolly old pull-out poster by Chris Achilleos, the in-house artist at the time. It basically caught up with 12 years of monsters, favouring the memorable ones, of course, and with Achilleos book reprints where stills were inadequate along the way. We're brought bang up to date with the Zygons, right at the back of the book. That and the background information, it was an interesting buy. There was I thinking nothing of a sequel when Bob's your script editor, what should turn up in the Christmas stocking 2 years later, Monster Book 2. Smaller this time, but in colour. It was strictly speaking a cop-out, as it systematically went through Tom Baker's stories from Robot to Talons, mentioning even monster-less stories, like Face of Evil. Perhaps a few years later, it should have emerged, particularly as with the Baker years, the best was yet to come. And as good as Philip Hinchcliffe was, he was trying to get away from the conventional monster image. And it was his era number 2 concentrated on. I was misled into thinking this would be a regular occurrence, and spent many a disappointed Christmas after which, waiting for Monster Book 3, which would take us where from the other one left off. From Rutons, Fendal, Ogre, Shuhenzal, Jaggeroth, Nymon, Stocks, and niggering you lot. Into the realms of J&T with the Marshmen, Thamazi, Pteroleptil, Plasmatons. Okay, and I also quite like the Ogun of America too. Satisfied? The point being, and there is one, it's not just a childhood whim. W.H. Allen, if they ever consider Who again, should pull Terence Dicks, condescending or not, from a dole where the space pirate seems to have left him, and get him to do Monster Book 3. What fun Watch catching up to do all 13 years of it. Come on, we've had some good monsters in that time. With the latest season 26 with the Destroyer, Hemovores, Husks, Cheetah People all being excellent. And Terence, how about really annoying the stuffy hardcore fans by writing it from the Doctor's point of view, aka The Adventures of Canine and Other Mechanical Creatures book. But of course, we're all far too serious for that now. If a monster book was to emerge, it would probably be done by some old fan with critical, very critical analysis and bouts of favouritism. Background information would be good though for Monster Book 3. But time has flowed by. Terence Six is away, fishing or something, and that kind of stuff is old hat now. You all probably think I live in Cloud Cuckoo Land for this writing this article, and you'd be right. Perhaps I could write it. Yes, please, Uncle W.H. Allen, please let me write it. Fame at last. Hordes of screaming girls at me saying, Doctor Who Weekly needs you, we don't. If you're still with us after that, here I am telling you about back issues of RPS. Remember RPS 1 was the C60? It's vintage now and could fetch £10 at a convention. Or
This year's auction. Our first lot is Rayphase shift numeral uno. What is my bid for it? Starting at 300.
300 up, so...
300.
Oh, I say, I'll pay 400.
So it must be sold to the highest bidder.
Well, I'm 6'3", I think I'm the highest bidder.
Well,
7 foot 8.
Anyway, any amount of 7 foot 8.
Oh, my height.
Your height.
If I get on your shoulders, I'm 29 foot 37 inches. How would that do?
It's 50-50. Well, you'll have 45 minutes and he'll have 45 minutes.
Tell you what, I'll give you £1,000 if you'll sign it, Nick. How about that? Eh? Yes.
Well, how can I resist?
we're now closing this alternative review issue.
Nick, lovely. Could you perhaps talk slower, please, because there's still a lot of tape to fill up.
This alternative review issue. Hope you enjoyed it. Oodles of thanks for the postcard from Andrew Candish. Even more to Warren Langdon for services not rendered. Oh, and Mr. A. Trowbridge, Paul Chandler, Lisa Wardle, Elaine Ball, Andrew Reed, oh, Musselwhite, and Wayne Fawcett of the Grimsby Fantasy Society. Hopefully, issue 4 hits the airwaves in October-November time. Didn't say what year, did I? As for the contents, why not fill it up yourself by sending some articles? Come on in, the water's lovely. Now, from the depths of the English Channel, where we're pursuing Mr. Candish with the water level rising.
Bonjour, salut, alors, hello. Comment allez-vous? Do you feel good? Good. And if you don't, get well soon. Sorry I couldn't make it earlier. All sorts of things cropping up at the last moment. How are we doing for time?
Rayphase shift, your attention please. You are hereby cordially invited to turn over to the other side for even more of the same yet again. Why don't you do that, eh? It's a free tape scene. Oh, sorry, I mean, it's a free world. I mean, obviously you paid for the tape scene. But of course the option is there and you are cordially invited to do so. Off you go. Go on.